As Allison welcomed you, so too I welcome you, and I'm grateful for your willingness to spend a few minutes with us this evening. This is a topic that I'm pretty excited about and always have been. I think we all would like to do better at writing our family stories, our family history. And it comes challenging, right? It's challenging for us. It comes hard. So on Tuesday, we talked about just the basics of preserving our artifacts, family heirlooms, etc. This will again be a very basic presentation. The whole idea I'd like to impart with you, or the whole feeling I'd like to share with you, is this is very possible. And this is very important for us to do what we can to write our family stories as a way of preserving them, write our family stories as a way of sharing with our great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren, whom we will never meet, and a great way of preserving living memory. We walk around with so much in our brains, in our minds, in our memories, and no one else has access to that unless we share that. And one of the best, most important ways, I believe, of sharing that is to write it down. Writing, I think we're trained. I think it's an unintended consequence of our schooling. We're trained to take writing seriously, right? Really seriously. We got to do it perfectly. There's grammar, there's syntax, there's spelling, there's context, and all of that kind of weighs on our psyche. And we think, oh my goodness, this is not going to be fun. This is not going to be enjoyable. And I really don't want to do this, right? Here in the 21st century, how many of us walk a half a block out of our way to have a miserable time? We don't, because we don't have to. I'm here to try to convince you that it can be really enjoyable. It doesn't have to be a miserable time. So unlike some of my presentations and my wonderful colleagues' presentations, the presentation and the handout will go together, but not necessarily follow each other 100%. Don't stress about that. I tend to want my handouts to be evergreen, something you can refer back to again and again and again as you get excited about writing and then maybe lose some of the spark and you want some help to get excited again, to start writing again. So download the handout, keep it in an electronic file in a folder somewhere, and go back to it. A lot of my presentation this evening will touch on pieces of that, not always in the same order as in the handout, because presentation order doesn't necessarily match written order. So again, don't stress about that. Handout and presentation kind of work hand in hand. So I'm going to go off camera while I share my screen and just spend some time with you, just giving you ideas. My whole intent is to give you ideas that just nudge you in a comfortable, positive direction to say, I think I can do this. I think it'll be a good time. And I think this will be meaningful for myself, my family, and those descendants of mine that will want to know about my life, and I will be long gone. So let's start that PowerPoint share here and be on screen now. My colleagues will let me know if we're not there. So Preservation Primer Part 2, Writing Your Family Story. I have a real passion about this. Most of what I have written in my life won't be published in any way until I'm no longer here. But there's a lot of great exploration that I've done. And I so firmly believe in this. Literally and figuratively. Literally was on Tuesday when we talked about family heirlooms and artifacts. Figuratively is this evening when we're talking about living memory, what we have in our minds, what we remember, how we can preserve and share that. We have history in our hands, and that is so amazing. It's amazing, it's awesome, and it's really a responsibility to share that with our family members if we care at all about legacy, about history, about family story and family history. We kind of have an obligation to share that with our family members. So history in our hands. The task. What's the task? The task is to write, correct? And as I've just briefly articulated, writing typically doesn't come easy. and for all kinds of reasons. I firmly believe, as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, we're kind of programmed to feel that writing is arduous and writing is really a chore, and that we are kind of exposing ourselves when we write, correct? People are going to pick at our spelling, they're going to pick at our grammar, they're going to pick at sentence construction. And so it's like, why do I want to do that? Why do I want to open myself up to all this criticism? Don't think that. Think, I'm writing for me. I'm writing for those who love me and care about me. I'm writing so that, again, generations I will never meet will know about me, will know how I have found pieces of the family story, and they will be able to benefit from my sharing of those pieces of the family story. So it's not going to come easy, but let's just start chipping away at those kind of unintended consequences of our learning or our schooling. Desire and experience can make anything more enjoyable. So let's try to flip our mindset to say, this will be fun. I don't have to sit and write a term paper all afternoon on a Saturday, as we remember back to our undergraduate days. I don't have to stay up until 2 in the morning to get my paper turned in on time. I can do it on my own terms. How liberating is that? And then experience. The more you write, I know you've all heard this before. Most of you probably don't believe it. Sometimes I even doubt it, but I find it in the end to be very true. The more you write, the easier it gets, and you find yourself almost without knowing it, writing little notes to yourself, writing little messages to yourself, again, without really even consciously saying, I'm going to sit down for 5 minutes and write what I experienced this afternoon during a telephone call, or what a photograph reminded me of. So try to flip that desire switch and just start writing. You really should help yourself out by writing daily. And it, again, doesn't have to be anything that's going to be published in the New York Times. It doesn't have to be the most brilliant piece of inspiration ever known to humankind. Doesn't have to be that at all. It could be, I listened to this Witcher guy talk this evening, and I think he's really full of it. You know, I don't think anything anything he says is going to work for me. He can do it all he wants, but I mean, doesn't matter what you write. Write every day gets you in that mood and that mode of recording your experiences, recording your observations, recording what you see and what you think. That next bullet point, I made those words red on purpose. Your unique thoughts, your unique words. That's what you're trying to record. You don't need to repeat what I say in your writings. You don't need to repeat a great author, a poet laureate. I mean, that's nice. It's wonderful. But when we're writing our family stories, it's what we think. It's our living memory. It's our recollections. And we might be surprised at how often our thoughts, our recollections, our remembrances provide inspiration to others coming after us or alongside of us as they're trying to find more of our family stories. It's more important than you think. So write daily, think about it positively, and don't try to mimic anyone else. We're not writing because we're trying to win a Pulitzer Prize. We're not writing to get published in the New York Times or the Washington Post. We're writing because we want to preserve and share our family stories. We want to preserve, record, and share living memory. When you do write, I should have inserted the word necessarily. Don't necessarily start at the beginning. Start wherever you want to start. Start with the triggered memory. So you're driving down the highway and you see a billboard and it just has a saying or a picture that reminds you of a great aunt and what she did, an uncle and what he said, a child and what they're experiencing. Start there, write that. Who knows in the end where that will fit into a bigger work? It doesn't matter. Capture that, record that. That memory, that thought, that piece of inspiration you have in your unique words, that could inspire you the next day, the next year, the next decade to further thought and to further writing and further memories. It really does work that way. The human brain is an amazing thing. I say that this at the bottom of this slide and in a different way at the top of the next slide. There is no right way to write, only right. We could play all night with right and right. There's no right way, only right. My slide froze just a little bit. So there's no right way, but not writing is simply wrong. I told you we could do this all night long. I promise I won't do it. We're done with the writing and writing. Equated to something enjoyable. We've already mentioned that. We like to do things we enjoy. And you might say, that's kind of a duh statement, Curt. And yes, it is. So if we want writing to be enjoyable, then let's do it in an enjoyable way. Maybe we do it, and I don't intend or mean to offend anyone, but maybe we do it, in a semi-lit room with an iPad and a couple fingers of scotch. Maybe we do it in a well-lit kitchen table because that's where we always have family stories and times and meals and memories, and we kind of want to be in that spirit. Maybe we do it at our keyboard, at our regular old desktop, because it's a more fun way of keying rather than all of our work-related keying. Equate it with something that is enjoyable, right? Take some time to experiment. I think when we do writing, we're not great experimenters. I think a lot of times in life, we're not great experimenters, period. Correct? We want to do it right the first time because time's a waste and we don't have to spend a lot of time experimenting. Well, when it comes to writing, I would just ask simply, why not? Why not experiment? Is there a better time of day? Do you write at the end of the day, trying to record and share your memories of the day? Do you like to have those inspired moments that you've had during the day, remembered, recalled? Do you like to write in the morning? Just a few moments before the race of the day gets started. What about the place where you write? I like to change up the place where I write. Some people have their favorite spot to think and listen to music and maybe light a candle or two. Whatever works for you, time of day, place. Do you write or do you keyboard? I do both, and depends on the mood that I'm in, and sometimes even depends on what I like or what I choose to write about. Sometimes writing, the actual physical act of writing, can help you get your thoughts, your memories down on paper or bits and bytes. There's actually science behind physically writing. When you physically write, it takes more effort than keyboarding, and that effort helps our brains continue to feed the story, find the story. It's like pulling a thread. We continue to pull that thread as our bodies are trying to communicate from brain to hand, brain to hand. It's pretty amazing. So if you haven't written, actually physically written in a long time because you've been texting or keyboarding, try it. It could be a different way of getting your brain to work with you. What about lighting? Do you like to write when it's fully bright? And do you have a favorite writing instrument? My colleagues can affirm that I am an office supply junkie. Go ahead, dare me to go into an office supply store and not buy something. That's never going to happen. Even if I don't need it, it's just, I'll find something really cool. So when I think about writing instruments, I like pens that flow. I like pens that feel good in my hand. I like keyboards that are soft. The most annoying thing for me is a clicky keyboard where every single click is a click, every single press is a click. Some people like that. Some people are kind of inspired. Can I make these clicks go by faster? Can I click without stop for X number of seconds or minutes? I know those things may sound in the silly realm, but it's all things that make our mind release a little bit of that comfort, lower the anxiety, lower the idea that we're writing a term paper or a thesis, or that we're going to get graded, or someone somehow, some way is going to judge us on what we're writing. No one's going to do that. Only you are going to be initially witness to what you're writing, and that can stay that way for a long time or for a New York minute. do you have an instrument, a pen, a quill pen, a ballpoint pen, a pen that has special insignia on it from a parent or a grandparent or a cousin? Sometimes when I use those, and I have just a few of those, I just feel different. I feel kind of inspired. I'm holding the pen of the grandfather I never met. He died well before I was born. What would he have written about this? So there's all kinds of, and I say this most positively and most endearingly, there are all kinds of games we can play, emotions we can conjure up to help us feel comfortable about writing. And I would just encourage all of us to do that. Engage your senses. We have talked about this in so many different contexts over the years, and certainly during our virtual programs, but it's true. Sight, sound, smell, touch, taste. Oh my goodness. If you haven't really ever deliberately tried it, I think you would find it fun. And yes, we all need to have a little more fun in our life, I think. Bake something that you like and do it in a way that you have time to write while it's being baked, or it's in the slow cooker, or it's in the crock pot. Does that smell encourage you to write something? Does that smell bring back memories that you'd like to capture? Sometimes when you're holding an instrument, a writing instrument that belonged to an ancestor, close or distant, that can inspire you as well. What about music? Certain types of music and taste. Engage all your senses. It could be really meaningful. Experiment with different formats. Some people are just really great at rhyming. Sometimes we can make rhymes without even thinking about it and annoy our spouses and our children with them. That's okay. Maybe we can do the same thing in our writing. Do we do a memoir? Do we like to cook? And maybe we get out a recipe and we just write for 90 seconds. This recipe came from my aunt. I remember her cooking this at bat mitzvah, Easter, 4th of July. I remember when I first tasted it, I didn't like the taste, but grew to like it. Or my first taste, I thought it was horrible, but then I found out later it was made wrong. Anything, everything. So cooking can be inspiration. What about calendar? On this day. I'm not a big on this day fan because I have a hard time remembering dates. Can you believe that? I'm in the genealogy space and I can't remember dates. Well, I have a hard time remembering dates, so I don't do on this day. I know a lot of people who really are great at saying, 7 years ago, Facebook kind of helps us out with it, right? Because it sends us little reminders. 2 years ago, last year, use that tool. Use that for some inspired writing. Progressive letter, I'll show you an example of a progressive letter that my father-in-law and his siblings wrote. It's pretty amazing. And then just random thoughts. Again, we're not being graded on this. You don't have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, a thesis, and then supporting documentation. This is just us. It's just us writing about us, right? So experiment with writing accessories. I think I already touched on that. What about contexting communiques? How many email do we get a day? What if you picked your favorite two? What if you picked your least favorite and just wrote 4 sentences about this email came from my boss, my friend, my rival, my mentor, made me mad, made me glad, inspired me, made me think a different way, saw a different view of something. You'd be surprised if you continue to do that, how you can begin to read back through some of your contexted communiques and begin to pull out threads that really become part of your family story. Who knows how and when inspiration strikes, but we need to open ourselves up to that. Be inspired to new thoughts and new ways of looking at things. The middle bullet point there, I can't advocate for that enough. As a society, as a group of civilized people, our listening skills wax and wane, but generally, and this is just my own personal belief, they're generally in a downward trend. Every day, I'm a participant in or observe numerous, not one, not two, but numerous conversations where the parties are not listening. Sometimes I can be 25 feet away, but close enough to hear what's being said, what's going on. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, you're not listening. Sometimes to be better writers, we certainly need to read and we need to listen. We can't really react to something. We can't really be inspired by something. We can't really embrace something if we're not listening. And you might think, Curt, what in the world does listening have to do with writing? Well, listening to hear the whole story someone else is telling, the whole thread someone else is showing figuratively, does provide our brains with stimulation and our brains with, that reminds me of, oh, I see what you're talking about. That reminds me of X, Y, Z. You'd be surprised. If you doubt me, challenge me, try it. Try it, you'll like it, as they say. Describe your feelings. I know a lot of people, especially stereotypically, men don't like to talk about their feelings. Again, this is, you don't have to put this on Facebook. You don't have to tweet about it. You just have to key about it or write about it. It's not a bad thing necessarily to get in touch with, well, how do you feel about this? And then the next question, or peeling back the onion, the next layer is, why? Why do you feel this? When someone tells me this, it kind of makes me mad. Well, why does it make me mad? Well, that's what my father used to tell me whenever he got mad at me or wanted me to do the chores I didn't want to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Your mind will, if you're open to it, your mind will lead you from one idea feeling to another idea feeling. And I think experimenting with writing in different locations can be really interesting. If you're fortunate enough to have a 3-season room, at the end or the beginning of the day, when there's so many wonderful sounds of nature, from birds and insects and breeze in the trees, there's so many sounds that can remind us of good things, bad things, literally all things. I really like this. It's in your handout, so I know this is a pretty poor slide. I apologize for that, but I've always been really jazzed about Family Search's 52 Stories project. It's a pretty long tooth project right now, and that link in your handout, use that link, because if you try to get through it through normal Family Search channels, you might get some error messages along the way. So go play with it, download it. There is a link on that site to download these discussion starters. I tried to zoom in on one, and again, it's a pretty poor slide, but this particular slide is 11 causes and convictions. Here are a dozen questions to inspire your personal history. So the first one, is there a motto or a creed that you live by? An inspirational quote that you have hanging in your home to guide you? In what ways do you sacrifice your time to volunteer for your community? What are some of the diseases that have been cured? Crises that have been, that have been effectively addressed in your lifetime? Well, my goodness, we're living through an amazing, in every way, amazing, good, bad, and ugly, the whole COVID crisis. So, man, do we have a lot of fodder for inspiration, for story, for writing. I don't think there's a person who's listening this evening that hasn't been at least indirectly affected by COVID. We have stories galore for us to record, for us to share our feelings and our experiences. Here in the Genealogy Center, it's been a particularly tough COVID on us. During the COVID time period, we lost 2 really dear colleagues, one directly from COVID and one not. We have suffered a lot of loss, and I think everyone on this program tonight has a loss story they can tell. Why not tell that? Again, your great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren will appreciate and benefit and become wiser for being able to read, and now today, hear us talk about our stories. We have the ability to preserve our voices for generations. Something to consider when we're talking about writing. We mentioned a few minutes ago about chain letters, progressive letters. So my father-in-law decided, when he came out of his cancer remission for the second time, and things didn't look terribly glossy, rosy, they looked a little gloomy, and they ended up being exactly how they looked. But he had this idea to start a chain letter with his siblings, and they all just glommed onto it. So we're not going to read this whole thing, but just wanted to share a few sentences with you. I go back to my childhood. I remember things, and he means from his childhood. I don't remember last week. I remember things from my childhood I don't remember last week, but I remember I have some beautiful memories. I woke up one Christmas morning and my whole world was covered with a thin layer of ice, the trees, the ground. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen before or since. I'll never forget that Christmas morning. I felt in complete touch with my maker. I can't verify what each of you think or say about this, but I bet there's not a person listening to this presentation that didn't come up with a memory that matched, complemented, supplemented, was inspired by those 6 lines. Isn't that amazing? So we can read someone else's kind of beautiful moment and we're inspired. It conjures up a memory, however our minds work, and we come up with, oh yeah, I remember. We've all seen ice-covered, snow-covered ground. So just another quick letter. According to Mama, it was February 1916. So again, this is over a century ago when we left Wild Dog Creek, Kentucky. I've joked with people over the years. I'd love to be from that great place of Wild Dog Creek, Kentucky. Isn't that wonderful? Came to Farmers Ridge to live with Mom. We walked all the way. Jack was the baby then, and Mama and Daddy carried him. I was almost 3 and had to walk. I remember wishing somebody would carry me because I was tired. I mean, just a simple thing like that. Here's a 3-year-old. He remembers being a 3-year-old and being tired and kind of jealous of his younger brother because he got carried and he had to walk. Daddy held my hand, led me across. He was talking about going across a railroad trestle. And when I read that, it took me back to my childhood days, the very brief time we lived in Saginaw, Michigan, where we parked. We had to cross a bridge. I believe it was the Saginaw River, and it was sturdy, etc., to get to my father's office. But I was always so afraid as a little kid because it wasn't a solid walk. You could see the water between the slats. And I always kept thinking, what if the slats? So when I read this, Daddy held my hand and led me across. It was very scary looking down through the cross ties and the water rushing below. And I thought, I was there. Not there in Wild Dog Creek, Kentucky, but I was there in Saginaw, Michigan. Pretty amazing. And I bet these kind of words speak to you as well. You know, just amazing. Here's another section where he's talking about he and his daddy went somewhere to get medicine. Daddy got a little drunk, was gone a little long time. And what happens? None of us have ever had any indiscretions, right? We're all perfect. So we can take a beautiful piece of family history and we can allow that to inspire us to write our living memory. And we can continue to weave that wonderful, wonderful tapestry of our family story. It really does help one write. We've heard that tired saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, I would just say it's a tired saying and it hangs around because it's true. Today, worldwide, we take over 1 trillion pictures on our smart devices. Why not let those inspire us? Why not go back through them, add some metadata to them? We can even add our voices as metadata to those pictures so we can pass that along. Use those pictures to inspire us. Even unidentified photographs can lead us to, oh, I don't know who's in this. I don't know where this at, but it reminds me of, or that looks like, fill in the blank. Use inspiration wherever you can find it. So this is a long time ago picture. I'm the sort of homely one way over there on the left. The guy who at that time had hair and no longer does. So I'm holding my 37-year-old son today, not 37 then. This picture's amazing. I found it, and a number of my sibs have found it, and a number of my cousins have found it. What have they found? Every time I look at it, I see something different or I'm differently inspired. So in this picture is my father and his 2 sisters and their mother. I don't have any other picture like that. When I see people in this picture, some of my first cousins, you know, they're with their young spouses. None of them have the same spouses anymore. I mean, there's at least a book, maybe several books, just writing the stories that have come out of this one family reunion picture. I know you have those. I know you have those. Don't say, oh, I've looked at that before. look at it again. Some of my colleagues say no family is normal, and I think that's pretty much true. But my family, man, did we really make an effort towards staying away from normal? So every time I look at this picture, it's like, oh yeah, that happened just a couple of years ago to this couple, this person, or whatever. So again, I know you have those photographs in your family, probably hundreds, if not tens of thousands of them. Use them as writing prompts. I'm going to spend just a few moments with this. I've used this example in a few, but just a few presentations in the past. Smell is scientifically our biggest memory trigger. Why not use it? So let's cook it. Let's cook our writing. How do we do that? Put ourselves in the presence of. We have cooked holiday meals for how long? Sort of like all of our lives, right? Do we ever take a moment? I know they're busy times. They're usually hectic times. You're trying to do way too much. But if you can steal a moment during holiday times or cook a holiday meal on an off holiday time, use those smells to bring back memories, to trigger memories. Your olfactory nerve, your sense of smell, is the strongest, best memory trigger. So I have 4 things to share with you. So not a secret to those who know me well. I come from a really broken family. That's why, again, that previous family reunion picture is a hoot. I get a different memory, feeling, vibe, inspiration every time I look at it. So as a young kid, I made breakfast because my dad was getting us kids ready for school, and my job was to make breakfast. And we had 2 choices. One, raw oats boiled for oatmeal, or cream of wheat. And you might think, well, why are you telling me this? Well, for me, anytime I smell cream of wheat, dozens of memories come back of not wanting to cook for everyone, not thinking it was fair that I had to do the cooking, like I had an older brother. What's up with him? And I remember also, as anyone who cooks, I'm sure can empathize with this, criticized a lot for if it wasn't perfectly smooth. You know, when you're cooking enough cream of wheat to feed 5 people, because my mom never got out of bed in the morning. Who the heck knows when she got up, but never got out of bed in the morning. So I had to cook cream of wheat, and it better be smooth. Well, when you're pouring an entire cup of cream of wheat, instant or not, into boiling water, if you don't pour it in like evenly and smoothly and keep stirring like a mad person, you're going to get lumps. And then people are going to kind of complain at you for, hey, Curt, this cream of wheat's kind of lumpy. I went into a little too much detail there, but it's just to emphasize smell. I can't smell cream of wheat without thinking of those dozens of memories. While my mom didn't cook, really, I mean, she had a couple really good dishes she could do, and I use the word dishes kind of loosely. She could broil chicken livers. Yum. Isn't that the best? Not so much, but they were cheap. Sometimes the manager's discount, which lets you know the chicken livers weren't quite as fresh as one might like them to be. But my mom made what she called chili, and it matches nothing like the chili that we think of today, the spicy hot chili. She put kidney beans in it. She put potatoes. If we were lucky, we had browned ground beef and tomato something, tomato paste, tomato sauce. But I can smell it and I can remember. I can remember how proud it was, and I can remember how amazingly good it tastes. I still prefer that chili over any other kind of chili. I can smell it too. I can smell it just talking with you about it. I love this. And anytime I go into a donut shop, my mind always goes back to how much my mother and my paternal grandmother really didn't like each other. And it was amazing, the passive aggressive activities that us kids, of course, wouldn't appreciate, wouldn't realize. So my mom wasn't probably the neatest, best housekeeper in the world, and that's okay. No harm, no foul. It was a very fine house to grow up in. But then when grandma came, when my father's mother came, it's like, no matter what Grandma Witcher could do, you know, don't mess up the kitchen. What do you mean don't mess up the kitchen? It's already a mess. Who cares? Well, so Grandma Witcher, she loved to make yeast donuts, and we love them. The smell is wonderful. Who doesn't like hot grease and yeast, right? And what do you do with yeast donuts? Immediately after pulling them from the pot, you sprinkle powdered sugar all over them. And of course, powdered sugar really stays in one unique location, right? No, there's powdered sugar everywhere. I didn't ever catch my grandmother smiling, but every once in a while, I thought I saw a little curve on the corner of her lips about when my mother would come down and just throw a fit about how much powdered sugar there was everywhere and how long it was going to take to clean up, and it was going to be impossible. And oh, did those donuts taste good? Oh, did we enjoy grandma and mom getting into it? And oh, did we enjoy making a mess with powdered sugar? And I could relay, not necessary this evening, many other memories. And I've written about all of those because those are my childhood recollections. We saw our paternal grandmother maybe once every 18 months to 2 years. So when she came, it was a big deal. And if she could come and rile up the household, well, as kids, we kind of thought that theater was kind of interesting as well. So the other thing, I can still smell these. To me, I'm sure it's in my mind, but that's okay. To me, refrigerator oatmeal cookies. As a kid, I thought that was adult torture. You make up a batch of cookies, and the last part of the process is to let them age in the refrigerator overnight. It's like, what do you mean we're not going to cook these and eat these now? To me, they smell different. To me, it always brings up my disappointment every time we go to make cookies. And usually it was my father who got the cookie making started. Go to make cookies, and now, are these going to be the refrigerator oatmeal cookies that we can't eat until tomorrow? Are these going to be regular, normal cookies? And they just smell a little different, but oh my goodness, do they taste wonderful. So about 8 years ago, my sister closest to me found the recipe and made some for us for Christmas. So probably spent too much time on that, but going back, use that. Use your olfactory nerve to bring back memories that you can write about. One thought, one recollection leads to another, maybe even leads to a question that you want to research, and the answer to that question will be yet more fodder for you to write. So can't go wrong. You just can't go wrong trying to find ways of writing. Doing something, as that bullet point says, is the key. Doing it right is not a concern. Make it enjoyable. I think that's the second time you've seen that on a slide this evening. You may see it one more time before we're done. Fun generates more good times. Your time is assuredly the most important thing. So make time. That's really the most important thing in writing. So as genealogists, as family historians, we collect all kinds of things, right? Vital records, official documents, school records, remembrance cards, military records. We're coming up to a holiday here, so military records come to mind, personal documents, letters, diaries, postcards. We do a lot of collecting, right? What if we write up our documents? Instead of just collecting them and organizing them, so, yep, this validates that so-and-so was born here. Yep, this validates so-and-so was died here and was buried here. What about saying, and I remember, or I never heard about great uncle Phil, but I did know his children, or I need to ask his children. Sometimes our writing can be a list of tasks for us to do. So we collect so many documents. Every one of those documents, I encourage you to use as a writing prompt, as a memory trigger, and then capture those memories with your pen or your keyboard. So use them as prompts. Use them for making part of your story come to life. So why write? There are only things that you know, only things that you've heard. Living memory is so undervalued. And we've heard that old expression that when a person passes, an entire library goes away. Well, again, that expression came about because, when we're gone, those things are gone as well. And what a shame if we're the only ones that ever knew that about an ancestor, about a sibling, about a descendant. What a shame. And it really is a gift to our children and grandchildren to know our thoughts and our feelings. It really does matter. And I think it matters a lot. So writing your stories. We've heard stories about the good old days, right? Have we written anything about our evaluation of the good old days? Do we believe there really weren't good old days? Are there really good old days we should be returning to? What part of the good old days did we like? What part of the story about walking uphill against the wind both ways to school? How did that story ever develop? How did it ever come about that, when we were growing up, we had it so much more difficult than this younger generation? How did that ever come about? Was that really true? School days are such a great memory prompt and great writing prompt. So muse about the good old days. Take a moment to write or record those stories and their origins, the good old days stories. When I asked my mother years ago about the good old days, that was the first time that, and maybe even close to the last time, that she was really soberly honest with me about how terrible her childhood was. And I've written many, many, many equivalent of pages on how terrible her childhood was. And that clearly affected the rest of her life, as you would expect it would. Use your children and your grandchildren and the funny things that they do, what those funny things remind you of. You can even use neighbors, kids and children and family. Use anything that inspires you to record your version of that, or inspires you to think about your family and your family experiences. Those triggers, those writing prompts and memory triggers are all around us. I would say choose your writing instrument, but I'd be very liberal in your choices, meaning you don't have to pick one and be wedded to it. Maybe you pick one and then another and then another and then back and forth, depending on your feeling, what feels right. If I want to get something down in a hurry because I feel particularly wordy in my mind, particularly verbose, particularly inspired, I'm going to grab a keyboard as fast as I can, because I can key way better than or faster, I should say, than I can write. Well, I can write keyboard better too, because sometimes my writing can be atrocious, as I think all of ours can. But play with how we can, in an inspired way or with some alacrity when we need it, record our thoughts. We carry around great devices with us. Our smart devices are so wonderful. What we use them for is a fraction of their power. We can record things all the time. There are so many apps out there that will help us engage family members. There's apps that will send questions to a family member, a parent, a grandparent, once a week or once a month, just a question. And there's an easy way for that person to respond. After a few days or weeks or months, depending on how you set it up, you have some family memories that you can write about. Again, as I self-declared, I'm an office supply junkie. So sometimes picking your paper as well as your writing instrument can be something that makes you feel comfortable. Long time ago, I can't find them anymore. I found these notebooks, and I believe it was at the great chain store Target, where they're only like 3.5 inches thick, but they're 11 inches long. I like this paper. You know why? Well, because I fall into a lot of the traps that we've just talked about. I can fill up a page really fast with paper that's only 3.5 inches wide. And then what do I feel? I feel accomplishment. And then I continue writing, and pretty soon I'm on the middle of page 3. And it's like, gee, Curt, you're pretty good. You filled up 3 pages. Yeah, 3 compromise pages, but nonetheless, 3 pages. So please don't ever feel like you have to write War and Peace. Again, no grade, no judgment. It's just you. Keeping it simple is the best. A lot of people say, I can't stand the blank computer screen. I can't stand holding my iPad in a write mode with like no ideas, no inspiration. Just remember that you know more than you think you know. So just kind of open yourself up, find a trigger or two, and just start thinking and writing. Less is more, small is great. Nothing's too small. What you think and what you write is consequential. You are the treasure and the treasurer, right? So you are the treasure, it's your memories, your writing, and you're the one that values it. You're the one that preserves it. You hold the keys to your family's heritage. It is the best gift that you can give to your descendants. Several surveys I would have cited one in your handout, but the one I found was very dated. I'd like to find a more recent one, but there have been surveys that have been done on people that are very comfortable in life, and they've been asked, so what do you really want to give to your children and grandchildren? The number one thing they want to give is a reminder, a remembrance of themselves, legacy, if you will, not gold and silver, not gold and silver. Well, what is legacy, not gold and silver? I think it kind of narrows the field a little bit, and it's story. It's our story. It can be one of the most interesting and exciting things that you do. I mean, you hold the keys. This is in your handout, probably closer to the front than closer to the end as we're approaching the end of this presentation. Read constantly, write daily. The people who read more are better writers. Why? Because things you read inspire you. Things you read give you ideas about how you can better articulate your ideas. Write where you're comfortable. We've talked about that. Experiment with different writing accoutrements, instruments. I told you you would see that one more time. And I think this is the last time you'll see it, and use your senses again. I keep repeating those because they're really important. Some tactics. We've talked about this just briefly. Write up your most frequent forms of communication, your email, your telephone conversations, your letters. Pick a few and write about them. No matter what the communique is. Maybe it was some sad news, happy news, promotion, demotion, God forbid, but maybe it was you were being fired. That's a great communique to write up. What are your feelings about that? Put your communiques in context. Context all of your communiques. Those can be great writing prompts. Write about your feelings and your perceptions of other feelings. Again, we saw this at the top of the hour. Your unique words, your unique feelings, thoughts, and being a little concise, something I struggle with, and I imagine some of you struggle with it as well. Can't say this enough. Write up your research. We're hunters and gatherers, right? We hunt down our ancestors' records and we gather them together. Do we ever take any moments to write our family stories based on the documents? I would say way less than 50% of us actually write up our research, actually put our research, our gathered documents in a form that's shareable with other individuals. We have a fertile inspiration ground in the research documents that we have gathered. Some of us have been researching for at least a decade. I'm going to say some of us for many decades. We have so many documents. All those should be written up. I have a birth record for a great-great. What does that mean? How does this person connect? Who are they to me? Why do I care? All kinds of memory triggers. I'm going to go through this quickly just for the sake of time. One of the things you can do to kind of train your mind to think in more detail is to look at any picture or anything. And I'm ripping this from my 8th grade chemistry class. Take a picture and look at it for however long you think is necessary for you then to key or write on a piece of paper everything about this picture and emphasize everything. And I even failed here, but I have 3 slides worth of what I see in this picture. And here goes. 3 men, all wearing suits, wearing ties, different pattern suits, different pattern ties, 2 button, 1 button, double Windsor knots, seated men looking at standing men. One has facial hair, cuffed pants, 1 man on the car frame, 1 man on the steering wheel, 1 man on the shift. The body is sled design, yada, yada, yada. 3rd slide. It's a map on the wall. Not all the map is there. Subheading on the map, decal on the wall, area heated by radiant water heaters. How in the world would I know that? Well, look at the picture. So paying attention to detail, and maybe this is a great compliment to my advice to listen. We will find a lot of things that will prompt memories, and then we have things to write about. So I'm going to share just a couple of memories with you to wrap up, and then I think we'll have a few minutes for questions. So candy and coin. What a beautiful combination. And I can never look at low value coins and candy together the same way. So this is from one of my personal diaries when I was writing about such wonderful memories. And I still haven't exhausted all my memories of Grandpa's house, my father-in-law. I put in so many weekends early in my library career when my boys were young, but oh, did they have such grand times at Grandpa's house on Saturdays that I worked. When they came home, hot from the day's activities, even when it was winter, they always shared stories with such great excitement about what Grandpa had told them or shown them that day. The exclamation, and I'll paraphrase here a little bit, it rang through the house. The exclamation, Grandpa said, echoed through the house. It went on for easily 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. Well, you know what, Daddy? Grandpa said, and then on with the story. And well, wait a minute. Grandpa also said. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. Just before they would leave Grandma and Grandpa's house, Grandpa would wrap candy balls in plastic wrap. It could be all different kinds and flavors, small bits and small pieces of candy. Put a few coins next to each bag of candy in its own plastic wrap. Double wrap the whole thing again. Each kid got one. They would come running into the house, or I would unstrap them from their car seats, and their little hands would be clutching that precious package from Grandpa. We were empty nesters for at least a couple of years when we were cleaning out our house. And you know what we found in the bottom of one closet? An unopened little precious package from Grandpa. I still write stories about that. So that was Grandpa's house. And I've written many stories about my mom's house. And I just want to show you how odd or maybe eclectic my thinking is. So my mom and my dad, before they were married, they're standing in front of my dad's mom's house. From the early 1900s to the late 1990s, a Witcher lived at 417 East 14th Street in Jasper, Indiana, for that entire time. And my mother really didn't like my dad's family very much at all. So I've written many pages about, wow, isn't that interesting? She's with him in front of their house. I wonder if she was over for dinner, which she probably wouldn't have enjoyed very much at all. But then I can recall my mom's house. I never saw the house that she grew up in. By the time I was old enough, my siblings were old enough to visit and remember, she was living in a house that they had just purchased/bought. And it was a brand newish house for the 60s. I never got to see the house that she told us about, the house where they kind of lived a very tortured early childhood. So I can write about my mom's house all the time. Some of the email we get, some of the Facebook posts are amazing. We're not going to read this one, but it's about Christmas memories. It's about losing loved ones near and around Christmas. We all probably have experienced loss of someone around a holiday, around a birthday, around some kind of celebration. And these Facebook posts can go on for a while. Use those as memory triggers. They're all around us. Other tactics. I challenged when I was teaching a non-credit class on family history. One of the assignments, you all would hate me as an instructor. One of the assignments was to pick an ancestor and write a 1,000-word essay. And automatically the eyes went wide and we were like, oh my gosh, a 1,000-word essay? Yes, a 1,000-word essay. It's easier than you think if you use all of your writing prompts and your memory triggers. I'm going to challenge you to write a 1,000-word essay for every person in your family tree. That will encourage you to have some writing prompts. Take some person-specific facts and weave them into your 1,000 words. Layer with appropriate geographic facts. Add some I wonder scenarios. I wonder what would happen scenarios. I can't hear bagpipes without thinking, and I've written many pages on the untimely and unexpected death of a first cousin. You know, when your first cousins die and you're in your early 40s and they're in their early 40s, it's like, this isn't supposed to happen. This is not supposed to happen. So you have to read my diary after I die to find out that story. But I can't hear bagpipes without thinking of Brenda, without thinking how incredibly sad and symbolic her funeral was. One small little tip, it was an overcast day. But when we drove from the church to the cemetery, when Brenda's casket was unleashed, if you will, from the hearse, taken out of the hearse, the skies opened up and it poured straight down. No wind, no thunder, no lightning. It poured straight down. My hypothesis, and again, I've written pages about this. The angels were crying. It was that sad. The angels were crying. So on the bottom of your last page of your handout, there is a small excerpt I took from our grandmother's loving portraits by 74 granddaughters. if we were running a little short on time, I would have read that to you. I will take it that you can read that yourself. This is the other picture. You have one picture in your handout. This is the other picture about Nanny Katie Ingraham and her blue dress with white flowers. We can take just one memory and we can create 100 words about it. And that's really what writing as a way of preserving our family histories, that's really what it's all about. And don't we love 3-generational pictures? I'm sure you have some. I'm going to end it there. I'm going to stop my screen share and turn my camera on and perhaps lean on my colleague Allison to see if there's any questions in the chat or in the Q&A where they belong, right?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Curt. There have been so many amazing comments. People are doing some wonderful things themselves and talking about them in the chat, which has just been great. I love seeing how people are interacting with their own families.
Absolutely.
So it's awesome. It's awesome to see these. But let's go through some of these questions and see how many we can get through. I think this one's kind of interesting. Can you predict the media type for our stories that may still be used 50 to 100 years from now? Or use the shotgun approach and use as many media types as possible?
Yes and yes. So I think I can predict, and it's probably a sobering prediction. If you really want to ensure that something of you is left, and I'm not a Luddite, promise, paper is still the longest living medium. If paper is kept in stable environmental conditions, it can last 500-600 years. But the key is stable environmental conditions, no mold, no insects, no rodents, no fluctuations in temperature. But that's not saying we should give up, as you know, Allison, on technology. Today's technology allows us to do, oh my goodness, so many things, so much better, and to gather quantities of family history so much easier. So why not try to invite as many people under our family history tent as possible, so they will continue to migrate our pictures, our electronic diaries from generation to generation. Electronic media is going to depend on someone else taking the responsibility of upgrading those to the latest medium. They say technology doubles every 18 months. We see that in our lives. So 25 years from now, whatever we're looking at, whatever USB drives, hard drives, cloud storage, going to be way different, way different. So, but paper's pretty solid. It's been around a while.
Yep, I will agree with that. Okay, this is interesting. I'm writing my grandparents' story. I'm at the point where I can either write things chronologically, how much of the research is organized, or along storyline threads. Some threads last 5 or more years. I'm looking for a balance. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to frustrate you. Allison probably can guess my answer. My answer is yes. And truly, both are valid. If you're really keen and clever, and many of you I'm sure are, you could do both in a twisted sort of interleaving kind of a way. But I'm going to go back to what I mentioned a lot during the presentation. Do what you feel is most comfortable for you, because then you will continue doing it. I kind of like the thread idea. A lot of popular TV shows do a thread kind of a concept from week to week, just to keep things exciting and interesting. But if it's easier for you and you're more dedicated to, I want to do this chronologically so I don't miss anything, I get inspired by building one block on top of another, well, then absolutely do it that way. Both ways you're preserving your family history. I personally like the theme or the thread approach, but that's me, and you're doing it for you.
100%. Curt, is there a good publishing market for family history stories?
That's a great question for which I have a pretty lousy answer. And that is, it depends. Like publishing, I know I'm sounding a little technocratic here, but what do you mean by publishing? Do you mean like, I want to put this thing between 2 hardcovers and distribute it to as many people as will take it? Great. I will tamp down some of your excitement with, we're in the middle of a worldwide paper shortage right now, so the price is going to be really high and you're not going to get much published right now. If you think my family history is going to be the one that's going to be on the New York Times bestseller list, that I'm going to make millions of dollars, I would just buy a lotto ticket instead, because I think your odds are about the same both ways. And I don't mean to treat that lightly. I just mean if you're publishing as in, I want to get this out there so that anyone who's interested has access to it, that's a whole different kind of publishing, right? So that's, I know this sounds really parochial because it is. That's like, well, I'm going to give a copy to the Allen County Public Library's Genealogy Center, and they're going to post it for me on their website for free. And our intention for that website is to have things up there as close to forever as possible, even with all the annoying updates that seem to happen at the most inopportune times. You know, that's life. Things happen. And we continue on. If publishing means, well, I only want it for my family, you still can, you know, have web space and do an EPUB only for your family. All kinds of options open today. And sort of like Allison, springboarding off the previous question, even more options in the future, because technology is really wonderful. We'll have really amazing ways of sharing things. Maybe we hand off a little chip, something smaller than a USB drive, to family members at a reunion. And that has all of our research, our pictures, our photographs, our copies of documents. And then each one of those family members are responsible for migrating that to the next generation of hardware, of software, so that it's viewable.
Awesome. So this one's about the progressive letter. Are you speaking of having one person start a letter, mail it to the next person, and then that person writes what they remember, and then so on?
Yes, 8 people. So Charlie and his 7 siblings just mailed it to each other. And if we had a 2-hour time slot, it would be funny, I think, because the person who received the letter from the previous sib would make some kind of like snarky, humorous remark about something that person had written about. So, oh yeah, of course, Ginger would write about this. I kind of remember it differently. And then they'd springboard into their memories of that, and then other things. It's a great letter. It's 37 pages. I mean, that's at least a pamphlet. I would call that a small book of family memories that took place over several months as they were mailing things back and forth. But it was the excitement of being together without being together, about sharing memories without having them anchored to a holiday or something like that.
That's fantastic. Do you have any tips on how to encourage society members to write articles for your society quarterly? I'm guessing along the lines of these family stories.
Wow, that's a question I didn't expect, and that's a very good question. I'll have to think on that for a moment. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. I don't want to uninspire anyone. I don't want to offend anyone, but we all kind of secretly know, don't we, that one of the most boring things in the world is to listen to someone else's family history or read someone else's family history. We want to listen to our own. We want people to listen to us. Writing a good piece for a journal, a quarterly, a newsletter, maybe working with the editor, maybe working a writing group. And I know a number of societies that have writing groups to write articles that serve as inspiration for others. So maybe picking a theme, maybe how our ancestors got to Coos County, Oregon, how my ancestors got to Jasper, Indiana. Why in the world would anyone settle in Jasper, Indiana? I mean, it's in the middle of nowhere. But if you know the story, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, this Catholic priest was an immigration agent, all these Germans tied to Cincinnati, tied to St. Louis. I mean, it's fascinating. So maybe if you could construct stories that are part of your family history, but also tell a bigger story about settlement, about migration, about schooling and education, I could see that being a possibility. I think in the I was just gonna say, I think in the 21st century, and I hope no one takes offense at this because it's not intended to be offensive. In the 21st century, I think we expect more out of our society newsletters than long lists of names. Like, here's all the landowners. That stuff belongs on a website. We don't need to have that mailed to our mailboxes or even emailed to our inboxes. When I get a newsletter or a genealogical society quarterly, I expect a little more than just lists like our 20th century newsletters were filled with.
I completely understand and I completely agree. So something that I thought I would mention just because it's a personal interest. My grandmother subscribed to this magazine and I started subscribing to it because I found it so fascinating as a child, which just tells you right then that I'm a history nerd. Reminisce magazine. And it's literally these just little stories. And I've always found it fascinating. It's a tiny glimpse into somebody's life.
Yeah.
That one moment. They have writing prompts and people send in their own stories. It's the entire magazine, the entire premise of this magazine is filled with stories from people like you and me.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I would just kind of wrap the subject by saying, wouldn't that be kind of cool if a genealogical society had locality-based, ethnic-based, or person-based prompts and maybe do a couple issues like that? That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, so maybe putting out those prompts ahead of time in the previous version and saying, hey, does anybody have any cool wedding stories?
Yep. Yeah.
Just
absolutely. That reminds me, I visited my mom last evening. She's in a memory care unit. She's on what a lot of people have called the long journey home. And it's going to be a rough one. And she's fighting really hard to remember things, and it's sort of that mental torture. And so what she used to say to us after we all left home, one of her final comments to us was, I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you. Okay. And that's a nice thing. Yesterday evening, and I already wrote a page about this when I went home last night. She couldn't remember prayer. She couldn't remember the word prayer. And she struggled and struggled, but not too long. And then she said, I will talk to God about tomorrow. You know, what do you say? But my mind was just filled with all kinds of remembrance of, I think she said it real casually sometimes and real meaningful. I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you. Goodbye. I'll pray for you. I love you. I'll pray for you. And yesterday it was like, I'll talk to God about tomorrow. Like, wow, where did that come from? So yeah, I think that would be a good thing for a genealogical society to kind of do a format change along the lines of what you were talking about, Allison.
Yeah, people pay for that magazine.
Yeah, yes, yeah, right.
So just a thought. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do one last question. We're actually over time a little bit, but there's been some great questions, great conversations. I didn't want to completely stop it early. But for the last question, what are your views on publishing versus blogging?
You probably can expect my answer now, right? You can probably guess the answer. My views are yes. I think blogs are a really useful tool. My concern about blogs is the same that I have about traditional publishing. How's it going to live on? Who's going to tend it, mind it, copy it, keep it, share it, enhance it? I think they're both really good means. Again, I'm going to roll back to what are you most comfortable with? What do you see as a vehicle that allows you to frequently and kind of fully express yourself, record memories, record your living memory, record what you've seen, what people have told you. What do you feel comfortable with? I don't know why. In my next life, I'll be a sociologist and I'll study these I don't know why questions, but I mean, blogs tend to provide a forum for people to kind of go on a while and sometimes go down a rabbit hole. But then there are writings that people go on a while and go down a rabbit hole. So there's not a whole lot of difference. Whatever you're comfortable with. I think blogs are great. There are people that really like to share. What a great way of recording something and sharing it nearly immediately. So it's pretty cheap too. Like, don't have to worry about a paper shortage, don't have to worry about a publisher, a binder, all that. However, just like with paper publishing, only a very, very few people actually make money at it. So if that's your modus operandi.
Fair.
I think most of us aren't interested in that being our retirement plan.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This has been a great evening, a great program. Curt, again, awesome. People have been raving about it. So thank you. Hopefully you all are able to get on our website at some point and register for our upcoming programs. We would love to see you at all of them. Remember, all of June is now on the calendar and you can register ahead of time. So have a good evening.
Take care. Thank you.